It is said that technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic, but in the grim darkness of the far future, such distinctions are irrelevant. There is only the holy dogma of the machine god and the blasphemy of the alien. For millions of years, the city of the ancients drifted through the void, a jewel of logic, science, and hope, forged by a civilization that sought to ascend beyond the mortal coil. They believed the universe could be understood. They believed peace was a destination. They were wrong. When the hyperdrive engines of the city ship Atlantis tore through the fabric of reality, they did not find the sanctuary of the Pegasus Galaxy. They emerged into a galaxy screaming in agony, a galaxy where science is superstition, where hope is the first step on the road to disappointment, and where the only currency of value is blood. The lost city has been found, but in the 41st millennium, to be found is to be hunted.
The transition was not the seamless, silken glide of a standard wormhole transit. It was a violent tearing, a scream of physics being tortured beyond its breaking point. For Dr. Elizabeth Weir, standing upon the command deck of the glimmering city ship Atlantis, the sensation was akin to falling through a kaleidoscope of broken glass. The city groaned, a sound not of metal stressing, but of a living organism crying out in shock as it was vomited from the subspace corridor and back into real space. The great spire of the central tower shuddered, and the omnipresent hum of the zero-point module, the ZPM, pitched down into a worrying, throbbing bass note. Alarms, harsh and rhythmic, instantly shattered the silence of the control room. "Report!" Weir's voice cut through the confusion, though her hands gripped the console with white-knuckled intensity. The holographic displays flickered, struggling to stabilize, painting the faces of the expedition team in erratic bursts of azure light. Outside the reinforced transpastile viewports, the stars did not look right. They were too dim, shrouded in a nebular haze that looked less like stardust and more like bruised flesh. The pristine geometric perfection of Atlantis, a jewel of the ancients, floated adrift in a void that felt undeniably, tangibly hostile. "I'm losing power regulation on the secondary conduits. The ZPM is... It's draining, Elizabeth. It's draining fast." Rodney McKay's fingers flew across his console, his usual frantic energy amplified by genuine terror. "We didn't just jump galaxies. We hit a turbulence layer in the subspace strata that I've never seen before. It acted like a siphon." He looked up, his face pale in the blue glow. But that's not the worst part. He tapped a sequence of keys, bringing up the long-range sensor diagnostics. The background radiation. It's wrong. It's not cosmic microwave background. It's noise. In the Warhammer 40K universe, space is not empty. It is the skin over the roiling muscle of the warp. To the incredibly sensitive crystal-based sensors of the ancients, technology designed to facilitate ascension and manipulate the fabric of reality, the warp was a deafening cacophony. It was a billion voices screaming in agony, a psychic static that clawed at the city's shielding. "The sensors are registering a psionic pressure of immense magnitude," Roderick Zelenka added, his glasses sliding down his nose. "The vacuum itself is angry." "Dial Earth," Lieutenant Colonel Sheppard ordered, his military instincts kicking in over the scientific curiosity. "If the neighborhood is bad, we leave now." The technician at the gate console nodded and initiated the dialing sequence. The great Stargate in the embarkation room below began to spin, the inner ring blurring as it sought the familiar coordinates of the Milky Way. Chevrons locked, 1, 2, 3, lighting up with the reassuring orange glow. But as the sequence reached the final coordinate, the symbol for Earth or Terra, the machine balked. The gate didn't just fail to connect, it violently disengaged, the chevrons darkening instantly. Sparks showered from the capacitors. "I can't get a lock," the technician yelled over the whining spin-down of the gate. "It's not a malfunction. The address, it's being blocked. It's like the receiving gate is buried under a mountain of interference." In truth, they were trying to dial Holy Terra, the throne world of the Imperium. The Astronomicon, the burning psychic beacon of the God Emperor, was a lighthouse so blindingly bright that the delicate, subtle handshake of the Stargate network was washed out like a candle in a nuclear detonation. They were cut off. "Contact!" Major Lorne's voice rang out from the tactical station. "Deep space sensors have resolved multiple contacts. Range 40,000 kilometers and closing." Sheppard moved to the forward viewport, squinting into the gloom. The view screen magnified the image, and a silence descended upon the command deck, a silence born of sheer, uncomprehending awe. They expected the organic insectoid hives of the Wraith or the pyramid ships of the Goa'uld. They saw neither. Emerging from the nebular smog were ships that defied aerodynamic logic. They were gargantuan, flying cathedrals of iron and stone, kilometers long, adorned with Gothic arches, flying buttresses, and crenellated battlements. They were ugly, brutal things, scarred by millennia of war, leaking radiation and plasma like wounded beasts. Massive prows, shaped like armored rams, jutted aggressively forward, and the flanks were bristling with weapon batteries the size of city blocks. "My God," Weir whispered, "they look like churches built for war." "They are hailing us?" Weir asked, hope fragile in her voice. "No," McKay replied, his voice trembling as he read the energy signatures spiking from the lead vessel. "They're scanning us, but not with radar. It's high-energy oscillating frequencies, and... Colonel, you need to see this." McKay pointed to the tactical plot. The massive Gothic ships were maneuvering with a lumbering, terrifying momentum. They weren't assuming a defensive formation. They were spreading out to create a kill box. "Energy spikes detected in their forward batteries," Lorne shouted. "They're powering up weapons." Sheppard slammed his hand on the comms button. "Shields up! Raise the cloak! Do it now!" But the city was sluggish, the ZPM drained by the transit and the interference of the warp. The shield shimmered into existence, a translucent dome of ancient technology, just as the Imperial cruiser Iron Will vented maneuvering thrusters and turned its massive macro-cannon batteries directly toward the fragile crystalline spires of Atlantis. The diplomatic mission was over before it began. Welcome to the 41st Millennium.
Magos explorator Varlian did not see the universe with eyes of jelly and optic nerve. He perceived it as a cascading waterfall of data, a holy stream of binary filtered through the noosphere. Suspended within his amniotic cradle aboard the Arc Mechanicus vessel Omnisia's Truth, his mechadendrites twitched like the legs of a spider weaving a web of logic. The air in his sanctum was thick with the cloying scent of sacred unguents and the ozone tang of overtaxed cogitators. When the rift tore open the void, Varlian felt it not as a tremor, but as a corrupted data packet, a violation of the local reality syntax. But then came the signal. It was a spike of energy so pure, so mathematically perfect that it nearly burned out his logic gates. It was a zero-point energy reading, a technology theoretically impossible since the dark age of technology. His vocal emitters, replaced long ago by a brass grill, clicked and whirred, synthesizing a sound of reverent greed. "Analyze," he canted in the high-speed binaric screech of the cult Mechanicus. "The machine god grants us a revelation." Through the eyes of 1,000 servo-skulls drifting in the void, Varlian beheld the anomaly. It was a city, yes, but it was an affront to the architectural grandeur of the Imperium. There were no gargoyles to ward off evil spirits, no flying buttresses to support the weight of faith, no rivets holding the hull plates together. It was a seamless crystalline snowflake of silver and blue light. To an unaugmented human it might have appeared beautiful. To Magos Varlian it was deeply suspicious, bordering on the heretical. It reeked of the silica animus, the men of iron. The geometry was too fluid, too autonomous. "Structure scan complete," a lesser tech priest droned from the bridge pits, his voice devoid of emotion. "Composition, unknown alloy. Lattice structure suggests self-repair capabilities. No visible engine exhaust, no Geller fields." Varlian's logic stack processed this. A ship without Geller fields that traveled the stars. It was either Exynos filth or a relic of such antiquity that it predated the warp's current turbulence. The noosphere lit up with the frantic prayers of the fleet's cogitators. The Iron Will, the Imperial Navy cruiser accompanying Varlian's excavation fleet, was already powering its macro cannons. "Belay that order," Varlian transmitted, his command overriding the Navy captain's authority with the weight of Mars behind it. "That object is not to be destroyed. It is to be vivisected." He zoomed his optical inputs on the central spire of the city. He could detect biological life signs within, fragile, unaugmented humans. Infestation, he concluded. They were clearly parasites, scavengers squatting within a machine they could possibly not understand. "The motive force of that city. It is a song I have never heard," Varlian mused, his internal cooling fans spinning up. "It is an STC fragment of the highest order, a construct of the ancients. To let the Navy brutes smash it with kinetic rounds would be a sin against the Omnisia." "Magos," the tech priest interrupted. "The object is attempting a digital handshake. The code is simplistic, based on primitive universal constants. It is attempting to communicate." Varlian dismissed the notification with a flick of a mental switch. The machine does not speak to the flesh, it speaks only to the priesthood. He observed the energy readings of the city dropping. The shield, a particle barrier of immense sophistication, was fluctuating. The city was wounded. It was vulnerable. This was not a diplomatic encounter. This was an archaeological retrieval operation. The biologicals inside were merely an obstacle to be purged, like moss on a sacred cogwheel. He began the rite of acquisition, blessing the databanks of his targeting array. "Prepare the Skitarii legions," commanded Varlian, the order flowing instantaneously to the awakening cryocrypts in the bowels of his ship. "Load the Caestus assault rams. Target the geometric variances in their shield grid. We will board them." He paused, his optical senses fixating on the 3 ZPM modules glowing at the heart of Atlantis. He could feel their power resonating in his steel bones. If he could bring this prize back to Mars, he would be elevated to Archmagos. He would be closer to the motive force itself. "The flesh is weak," he intoned, the standard mantra of his order taking on a dark, predatory edge. "But the machine is eternal. Seize the city. If the occupants resist, recycle their biomass." The Omnisia's truth turned its prow towards Atlantis, opening its launch bays like the maw of a great metallic shark.
"I don't understand," Rodney McKay snapped, his fingers hammering a sequence of commands that would have baffled a standard Earth physicist. "I am broadcasting the Fibonacci sequence. I am broadcasting the atomic weight of hydrogen. I am broadcasting images of smiling humans waving hands." He gestured wildly at the erratic readings on his screen. "This is First Contact 101. Even if they are xenophobic, they should recognize mathematical constants." On the main view screen, the hulking shape of the Imperial cruiser Iron Will loomed like a jagged mountain range of iron. It offered no answering handshake, no digital acknowledgement. Instead, it sat there, radiating a palpable sense of menace. "They're jamming us, Rodney," Sheppard said, his voice low. "Or maybe they just don't care about math." McKay scoffed. "Everyone cares about math, Colonel. It's the universal language." But as he adjusted the subspace transceiver, McKay felt a cold knot form in his stomach. The signals returning from that ship weren't language, they were chants. Low-fidelity, repetitive audio loops of chanting voices overlaid with the grinding sound of heavy industry. It wasn't a communication, it was a religious service broadcast on a military frequency. On the bridge of the Imperial cruiser Iron Will, Shipmaster Hector Vance sat upon a throne of command that had been fused to the deck plating 3 centuries ago. He was a man of scar tissue and gold braid, his right eye replaced by a targeting monocle that glowed with a baleful red lumen. "Report," he barked, his voice rasping like sandpaper on stone. The Vox officer, a woman whose mouth had been sewn shut and replaced with a Vox grill, swiveled her chair. "My lord, the object is broadcasting scrap code. It is a relentless stream of logic ciphers and unauthorized data packets. No prayers, no hymns to the God Emperor, no identification codes authorized by the Segmentum Command." Vance tightened his grip on the armrests of his throne. "Abominable intelligence," he muttered, spitting the words like a curse. "A machine that speaks for itself without the sanctified guidance of a soul." In the Imperium of Man, technology that thought for itself was the ultimate heresy, a reminder of the Dark Age where machines enslaved mankind. To Vance, Atlantis was not a marvel, it was a daemon in a metal shell. Back on Atlantis, McKay's arrogance was rapidly being replaced by a horrifying realization. He had managed to penetrate the passive scans of the Imperial ship's engineering section. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Colonel, look at this." He threw the schematic onto the main holographic display. It was a nightmare of engineering. They are running fusion drives, but the shielding is practically non-existent. The radiation leakage in their engine decks is lethal. Their crew must be dying by the thousands just to keep the ship moving. He zoomed in further. And their weapons, they aren't energy-based. They are projectile weapons. But look at the loading mechanism. The schematic showed not automated loaders, but thousands of Heath signatures, human bodies manually hauling shells the size of school buses into breach chambers. They use manual labor to load naval artillery. They have space travel, but they use slaves to load the guns? Who are these people? "The mute spirit is the dangerous spirit," Shipmaster Vance intoned, reciting the Lictitio Divinitatis. "We do not treat with the soulless, we purge them." He looked at the massive crystalline city floating before him. It was too clean, too perfect. It offended his eyes accustomed to the grime and glory of the Imperium. He turned to his master of gunnery. "Lock main batteries, macro cannons, high-explosive penetrator rounds. Target the central spire. Let us see if this glass ball can bleed." The order was relayed down the length of the iron will. Deep in the gun decks, gangmasters cracked electro-whips. Thousands of indentured bondsmen heaved on massive rusted chains, chanting in unison, pulling the megaton shells into the breaches. The gears of the ship groaned, a sound like a dying god, as the massive turrets rotated. "Energy spike!" Lorne yelled. "They're firing!" In the vacuum of space, there is no sound, but the physics of the Warhammer 40K universe seemed to defy this mercy. When the iron will fired, the recoil was so violent the entire cruiser shifted sideways. Muzzle flashes the size of nuclear detonations lit up the dark void. Across the distance, half a dozen shells, solid slugs of adamantium and promethium, each weighing nearly a kiloton, screamed toward the city. They didn't move with the speed of light, but with the unstoppable momentum of an avalanche. "Brace for impact!" Sheppard shouted. The shells slammed into the ancient shield. There was no explosion, only a brilliant flare of orange energy as the kinetic force was dispersed across the barrier. But the physics still applied. The city of Atlantis, floating in zero-G, was punted backwards. The inertial dampeners whined in protest, and every crew member was thrown to the floor. The lights flickered and died, replaced by emergency red. The silence of the void had been broken. The dialogue of diplomacy had ended. The argument of high explosives had begun.
The city of Atlantis groaned, a low-frequency vibration that rattled the teeth of every soul on board. Major Evan Lorne felt the tremor through the soles of his boots as he sprinted across the deck of the jumper bay. Above him, the ceiling retracted, revealing the terrifying, strobing light show of the Void War outside. "Squadron, sound off," he barked into his headset. A chorus of affirmations flooded his ear. Fearful, yes, but disciplined. These men and women had fought the Wraith. They had fought the Replicators. But as Lorne vaulted into the pilot seat of Jumper 1, the neural interface connecting instantly to his temporal lobe, he knew this was different. The Wraith were biological monsters. The enemy outside was a monster of industry. The bay depressurized, and the puddle jumpers, cylindrical, unassuming crafts that looked more like shuttles than fighters, lifted silently on their inertialess drives. "Clear the tower," Sheppard's voice crackled from the control room. "Keep them off the shield. Buy us time to figure out how to fight back." Lorne pushed a thought into the machine, and Jumper 1 shot forward, not with the roar of an engine, but with the sudden, impossible acceleration of a thought made manifest. As the squadron cleared the city's shield bubble, the scale of the Imperial assault became horrifyingly clear. Pouring from the launch bays of the distant cathedral ships were swarms of Fury interceptors. They were hideous machines, flying bricks of adamantium powered by brute force plasma thrusters. They vented black smoke into the void, trailing tails of dirty promethium exhaust. They didn't fly, they bludgeoned the laws of physics into submission. "Contacts, 3 o'clock high,"
Lorne's heart lit up with hundreds of red targeting reticles. The Imperial fighters were crude, but there were so many of them. Streams of autocannon fire, solid slugs the size of soda cans streaked through the darkness, creating a wall of lead. "Break formation, pattern Delta," Lorne ordered. The puddle jumpers scattered, their flight paths defying inertia. They drifted sideways, spun on dimes, and accelerated instantly in reverse, movements that would have turned a human pilot into jelly inside a conventional cockpit. But inside the jumpers, the inertial dampeners kept the air still and calm. It was a ballet of silence amidst a storm of noise. Target locked, Lorne thought, and the jumper responded. He wasn't wrestling a stick or modulating a throttle. He was simply willing the ship to be elsewhere. An Imperial interceptor painted in the drab gray of the Navy and adorned with a weeping skull decal roared past him, its side thrusters firing erratically as the pilot tried to track the slippery ancient craft. Lorne could almost feel the confusion of the human inside that metal coffin. The Imperial pilot was fighting G-forces, wrestling with hydraulic controls, praying to a machine god for guidance. Lorne was sitting in a comfortable chair, sipping the battle through a straw of pure data. "Engaging," Lorne murmured. He deployed the drive pods. The jumper didn't fire lasers. It didn't fire bullets. From the side compartments, a swarm of golden lights poured out, squid-like projectiles that hummed with a predatory intelligence. Drone weapons. The engagement that followed was a massacre of paradigms. The Imperial void shields were designed to stop high-velocity impacts, macro-cannon shells, lasers, missiles. They worked by displacing kinetic energy into the warp, but the ancient drones were not dumb projectiles. As they approached the lead interceptor, they didn't slam into the void shield. They slowed down. They tasted the frequency of the energy barrier, found the harmonic gaps, and simply phased through. The Imperial pilot likely never understood what killed him. One moment, his shield cogitator was registering a green status. The next, a swarm of golden light bypassed his armor entirely. The drones didn't explode on the surface. They burrowed. They sought the heat of the plasma reactor like bloodhounds. "Emperor, protect us! The lights! The lights are inside the hull!" The panic on the open Imperial Vox channel was absolute. Lorne watched as the lead interceptor didn't just blow up, it was dissected. The drones tore through the ship from the inside out, slicing through bulkheads, engine blocks, and the pilot's cockpit with surgical precision. The ship unraveled, turning into a cloud of spinning metal and venting gas. "They are demon engines," another voice screamed over the radio. "They ignore the holy wards." To the superstitious pilots of the 41st Millennium, technology that could bypass a void shield was sorcery. Lorne felt a grim grimace tug at his lips. It wasn't magic. It was science that had evolved past the need for brute force. "Splash 1, Lorne reported, his voice flat. "Squadron, free fire. Don't let them get close to the city." The golden swarms expanded, a deadly fireworks display against the backdrop of the Gothic fleet, proving that while the Imperium had the weight of iron, Atlantis had the edge of the scalpel.
Magos Varlian did not believe in the inefficiency of laser fire when the direct application of mass would suffice. The shield of Atlantis was a masterpiece of energy manipulation, a shifting wall of mathematical probability that deflected energy and dispersed kinetic force. But Varlian had calculated the variable. The shield frequency modulated every 0.4 seconds to cycle the ZPM's heat output. It was a window of vulnerability measured in milliseconds, too fast for a human pilot, but an eternity for a machine spirit. Launch solution calculated, the cogitator's servitor rasped. From the ventral bays of the Omnisia's Truth, 5 Kestis assault rams screamed into the void. These were not graceful shuttles, they were flying blocks of ceramite and plasteel, tipped with magnum melta charges designed to burn through starship hulls. They hit the Atlantis shield at the precise microsecond of the modulation cycle. There was no graceful docking procedure. The rams slammed into the gleaming silver hull of the West Pier with the force of meteorites. The beautiful ancient metal screamed as it was buckled, melted, and penetrated. The hull integrity alarms on the Atlantis bridge didn't just beep, they shrieked a flatline tone of structural violation. The assault ramps of the Kestis rams slammed down onto the pristine, polished floors of the Atlantis corridor. Smoke, thick with the smell of burning ozone and sacred incense, billowed out, instantly staining the sterile environment. From the haze emerged the Skitarii. They were a nightmare of post-human engineering. Once men, their legs had been replaced with hydraulic pistons, their eyes swapped for optical sensors, and their eyelids removed so they could never look away from the enemies of the Omnicia. They wore the crimson robes of Mars, heavy and stained with oil. The air around them shimmered, not from heat, but from the invisible, cancerous halo of radiation emitted by their weaponry. These were the Skitarii vanguard, the rad troopers. To stand near them was to court death by sickness. They did not shout. They emitted a burst of binary cant, target identified, purity 0%, protocol purge, and raised their radium carbines. Ronan Dex had hunted the Wraith for 7 years. He had fought genie soldiers, hybrids, and monsters that defied description. He had never seen anything like this. He slid around the corner of the corridor, his particle magnum already spinning in his hand. Intruders on level 4, he barked into his headset, his voice calm, predatory. He squeezed the trigger. The energy blast, capable of stunning a Wraith or blowing a hole in a wall, slammed into the chest of the lead Skitarii. The cyborg was thrown backward, its chest plate glowing orange from the heat, but it didn't scream, it didn't writhe, it simply rebooted. Gears whirred, servos corrected the balance, and the Skitarii stood back up, a hole smoking in its chest, marching forward with the relentless jerking gait of a marionette. Ronan narrowed his eyes. "Okay," he grunted, switching his gun to kill. "Hardway it is." The corridor erupted into a storm of light. The Skitarii fired in perfect unison, a wall of hypervelocity radium bullets filling the air. The rounds didn't just impact, they irradiated. The walls of Atlantis hissed where they were struck, the ancient alloy discoloring under the radioactive assault. Ronan moved with the fluid grace of a jungle cat, sliding under the volley, rolling and coming up firing. He put a round directly through the head of the lead cyborg. The metal skull shattered, spraying oil and gray brain matter across the pristine white panels. But for every one he dropped, 2 more stepped over the chassis of their fallen brother without a moment's hesitation. They felt no fear, they felt no sorrow. They were extensions of Magos Varlian's will. Ronan could feel a strange heat on his skin, a metallic taste in his mouth. The radiation poisoning was already setting in. He realized with a jolt of horror that these weren't soldiers, they were walking toxic waste dumps. One of the Skitarii Rangers broke from the formation, moving toward a wall interface panel. From its robe, a mechadendrite, a metal tentacle tipped with a data spike, snaked out and plunged into the crystalline port of the ancient console. The Skitarii attempted to commune with the machine spirit of the city, to force the abominable intelligence into submission with a forceful injection of logic psalms. It was a fatal error. The ancient database was not a cogitator bank. It was a repository of knowledge spanning millions of years, encoded in a language of such complexity that it bordered on the metaphysical. The Skitarii stiffened. Its optical sensors flashed from blue to a blinding white. A scream, not human but electronic, tore from its vocal grill. Error, data overflow, logic stack failure, too much light. The cyborg's head literally exploded in a shower of sparks as the sheer volume of ancient data fried its neural cortex. The remaining Skitarii paused, confused by the demonic defense of the city's spirit, giving Ronan the second he needed to reload. The distress cant from the Magos was received by Iron Father Carden of the clan Rao Khan not as a plea for help, but as a tactical variable update. The strike cruiser Ferrum Eterna, hanging silently in the shadow of the gas giant, rotated its engines. "The Mechanicus fails to secure the objective," Carden stated, his voice a grinding tectonic plate of Vox-synthesized bass. "Flesh is fallible. Iron is constant." He did not pace. He did not shout. He stood immobile on the bridge, his body 70% cybernetic replacement, his organic heart long since replaced by a graviton pump. The calculations were instantaneous. The target was a high-value archaeotech extraction. The obstacle was a biological infestation. The solution was the spear tip. Initiate drop pod assault.
target the central spire, zone mortalis protocols in effect. He did not ask for volunteers. The Astartes of the Iron Hands simply stepped into their drop pods with the silence of loaded bolters. To the crew of Atlantis, it looked like a meteor shower. 10 black streaks of fire erupted from the distant Imperial cruiser, burning through the thin atmosphere of the city's shield bubble. These were not graceful ships, they were kinetic hammers. Impact in 5, 4, 3, Lorne shouted over the comms, but the warning was superfluous. The drop pods smashed through the glass ceiling of the gate room embarkation deck. The sound was deafening, the shattering of 10,000 years of crystal architecture mixed with the crunch of plasteel hitting the floor. The pods embedded themselves in the deck plating, hissing steam. For a second, there was silence. Then the explosive bolts blew the doors open. For the Gorgon! For the Emperor! The roar was not human. It was the sound of war incarnate. Major Lorne's security team opened fire immediately. The chatter of P-90 submachine guns filled the air, a hailstorm of armor-piercing rounds. Against the Wraith, these bullets were effective. Against the ceramite power armor of the Adeptus Astartes, they were rain on a tank. The Iron Hands stepped from the smoke, 7-foot-tall giants of black metal and silver trim. They didn't take cover. They simply walked forward, the small-caliber bullets sparking harmlessly off their pauldrons. Then they returned fire. The Godwin pattern bolter fires a .75 caliber mass-reactive rocket-propelled grenade. When the first round hit a Marine of the Atlantis security team, there was no wound. The man simply ceased to exist from the waist up, turned into a red mist. The efficiency of the slaughter was terrifying. The Astartes moved with a speed that defied their bulk, transhuman dread. The physiological reaction to seeing something so big move so fast froze the defenders in place. "They're slaughtering us," Sheppard yelled, sliding behind a console as a bolter shell blew the terminal next to him into shrapnel. "Rodney, do something!" In the control room, McKay, sweating profusely, slammed his hand onto a panel. "Force fields! I'm raising the internal brig containment fields." Beams of hard light snapped into existence around the Iron Hands, boxing them into invisible cages. "Ha! Got you, you oversized tin cans!" McKay shouted, the relief palpable. Down in the gate room, Iron Father Pardon paused. He looked at the shimmering wall of energy blocking his path. He did not panic. He raised his left hand, a power fist, crackling with a disruption field capable of tearing open a tank. He activated the field. With a single, contemptuous backhand, he struck the ancient force field. The energy barrier didn't just break, it shattered like glass, the feedback blowing out circuits in the control room 3 levels up. "Your sorcery is weak," Cardin's Voxcaster boomed, amplified to terrify. The Iron Hands advanced up the stairs toward the control room. They did not run. They marched with the inevitability of a glacier. Every step cracked the delicate floor tiles of the ancients. Sheppard watched on the monitors, his face draining of color. He had fought space vampires and replicators, but he had never seen anything like this. These weren't soldiers. They were biological tanks, stripped of fear, stripped of mercy, and stripped of humanity. "Fall back," Sheppard whispered, realizing the futility of the fight. "Evacuate the gate room. Seal the blast doors." As he watched, one of the Astartes grabbed a wounded security officer by the neck. The Marine didn't even look at the man. He simply squeezed, his servo motors whining, until the struggle stopped, then tossed the body aside like a rag doll. "The flesh is weak," Cardin intoned, his optical sensor locking on to the ZPM interface. "We bring the purity of the machine." It began not with a sound, but with a silence. A sudden, suffocating pressure that descended upon the psyche of every living soul in the sector. Deep in the immaterium, where the souls of men shine like candles, a shadow swept across the stars. It was the shadow in the warp, the psychic scream of 1,000,000,000 minds thinking as one. Far beyond the edge of the system, something ancient and hungry had tasted the exotic energy discharge of the ZPM. It had tasted the violence of the macrocannons. To the hive mind, the battle between Atlantis and the Imperium was not a war of ideologies. It was a dinner bell. A splinter fleet of high fleet kraken, drifting dormant in the void like a minefield of flesh, awoke. 1,000,000,000 eyes opened in the dark. 1,000,000,000 maws began to salivate.
the hunger was bottomless. It did not want conquest. It did not want technology. It wanted biomass. It wanted to turn the jewel of Atlantis and the iron of the Imperium into slurry. On the command deck of Atlantis, Teyla Emigan fell to her knees, clutching her head. Her connection to the Wraith had attuned her mind to psychic networks, but this was an ocean compared to a drop. "Teyla!" Sheppard shouted, momentarily ignoring the advancing iron hands on the monitors. "What is it?" Teyla looked up, blood trickling from her nose, her eyes wide with a terror that transcended fear. "They are here," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Not the Wraith, something older. Something that does not hate, but only consumes. It is a hunger that fills the sky." Simultaneously, on the bridge of the Iron Will, the ship's astropaths began to scream. They clawed at their eyes, raving about kitten and claw before their brains hemorrhaged from the sheer psychic pressure. The navigator's third eye went blind. The warp was gone, replaced by the static of the Great Devourer. "Colonel," McKay's voice was an octave higher than usual, bordering on hysteria. "Forget the Space Marines, forget the cyborgs, look at the long-range sensors." The holographic display shifted. The red dots representing the Imperial fleet were suddenly dwarfed by a tidal wave of biological contacts entering the system. They were not ships of metal and engine. They were colossal, living organisms. Leviathan hive ships the size of continents, their ribbed, fleshy hulls pulsing with fluid. They moved through the void on plumes of ejected gas, surrounded by clouds of millions of smaller organisms. "I'm reading zero metal content," Zelenka stammered. They are made of meat. The ships are alive." The Hive Fleet did not hail them. It did not posture. It simply vomited its cargo into the void. Thousands of mycetic spores, fleshy, armored drop pods were launched toward the Atlantis shield and the Imperial ships. Alongside them flew clouds of gargoyles, leathery winged horrors that blotted out the stars like a plague of locusts. The Iron Will, previously the Predator, was instantly swarmed. The Imperial cruiser fired its macro cannons, blowing apart massive chunks of biomatter, turning the hive ships into fountains of acidic ichor. But for every bioship destroyed, 2 more pressed forward, ramming the Imperial hull with tentacled boarding tubes. The hunter had become the prey. The sheer scale of the biomass was a mathematical impossibility. The sky was literally turning purple with the density of the swarm. Elizabeth Weir stared out the viewport, the beautiful blue light of Atlantis now cast in the sickly shadow of the approaching swarm. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. They had fled the Pegasus Galaxy to escape the Wraith, creatures who culled human herds for food. But the Wraith were farmers. They left enough survivors to grow back. This enemy, this was different. "They're locusts," she realized aloud. "They don't just eat the people, they eat the air, they eat the water, they eat the bacteria in the soil." Beside her, Sheppard watched a massive hive ship open its jaws, preparing to latch on to the city's shield. "Out of the frying pan," Sheppard muttered, gripping his P90, "into the meat grinder." The war for ideology was over. The war for survival had begun. The sky above Atlantis had ceased to be a void of stars. It was now a churning ceiling of flesh. The ancient city shield, a masterpiece of Lantean engineering capable of withstanding the crushing pressure of an ocean, was being tested by something far more corrosive. Millions of mycetic spores rained down like hail, exploding on impact against the amber energy dome. They didn't just detonate, they smeared. Thick, viscosity-rich bioacids sizzled across the shield's surface, trying to eat through the frequency modulation. Inside the city, the sound was hideous, a constant rhythmic drumming like rain on a tin roof, magnified 1,000 times. "Drone reserves are at 12%, Major Lorne shouted, his voice barely audible over the screaming of the perimeter alarms. "We're running out of ammo, Colonel. We can't hold them back forever. If that shield fails, we drown in them." On the monitors, the horrors were visible. Hormagaunts, creatures of scything talons and boundless aggression, were already landing on the shield's surface, clawing mindlessly at the energy, trying to dig their way in. On the bridge of the omniscized truth, Magos Varlian watched the calculus of his demise unfold with cold binary detachment. The Imperial fleet was dying.
The Iron Will was venting atmosphere from 1,000 hull breaches. Its void shields had collapsed under the psychic weight of the shadow in the warp and the physical weight of the boarding organisms. Gargoyles clogged the engine intakes, choking the holy promethium fires. Probability of survival, 0.04%, his logic engine intoned. Projected time until total biomass assimilation, 14 minutes. Varlian felt a twitch in his organic brain. Fear? No, it was inefficiency. To die here, to let this archaeotech city fall to the great devourer, was a waste of resources that would damn his soul in the eyes of the Omnisci. Then, a transmission cut through the static. It was not the screech of Tyranids, but the clear digital voice of the woman, Weir. Imperial Commander. Elizabeth Weir's voice was steady, though her hands trembled on the console. This is Dr. Weir of Atlantis. We have a shield that can withstand this storm. You have the heavy ordnance we lack. If we stay separate, we both die. If you dock your ships within our perimeter city, we can cover you. Silence stretched for a terrifying 10 seconds. On the Imperial side, Varlian processed the request. To ally with the heretic, to dock within a Xenos construct, it was blasphemy. But the alternative was extinction. The logic of the machine god was harsh, but it was pragmatic. Proposal accepted. Varlian's synthesized voice grated back, devoid of gratitude. Do not mistake this for peace, biological. This is an equation of necessity. Lower your frequency modulation to match our drive signatures. We are coming down. It was a sight that would never be recorded in the Imperial archives, for it was too shameful, yet too magnificent. The massive burning hulks of the Imperial fleet, the Iron Will and the Omnisci's Truth, broke formation. Trailing smoke and leaking fuel, they descended toward the floating city. Atlantis, the jewel of the ancients, widened its shield bubble. The energy dome fluctuated, opening a temporary aperture. With the grace of falling mountains, the Gothic ships slipped inside. The moment they crossed the threshold, the roar of the Tyranid swarm was cut off, replaced by the hum of the ZPM. The Imperial ships hovered low over the gleaming spires, their gravity dampeners groaning, effectively turning Atlantis into a fortress. The city now had teeth. The macro cannons of the Imperium, no longer needing to waste power on movement or shields, turned outward. "They're breaching the East Pier," Ronan roared, spinning his particle magnum. A mycetic spore had managed to phase through a power fluctuation before the Imperial ships entered, crashing into the promenade. From the wreckage, a brood of gene-stealers erupted, four-armed nightmares of chitin and muscle. Ronan fired, blasting a hole through one, but they were too fast. Suddenly, a thunderous roar filled the corridor. Blam, blam, blam! Explosive bolts the size of fists tore into the gene-stealers, detonating inside their carapaces and showering the area in purple gore. An iron-hand squad, led by a sergeant with a bionic eye, stepped over the debris. They didn't look at Ronan. They didn't acknowledge the Atlantis security team. They simply formed a line of death, their bolters creating a wall of death. For the first time, the sleek energy weapons of the ancients and the brutal explosive projectile weapons of the Imperium fired in the same direction. "Keep clear of my line of fire, mortal," the Space Marine growled. Ronan grinned, reloading his gun. "Just save some from me, metalhead."
To stabilize the erratic ZPM flow and effect the repairs necessary for a hyperdrive jump, Dr. Zelenka had insisted on grounding the city. Atlantis now sat upon the gray, cratered surface of a nameless barren moon, its spires reaching up like crystal fingers into the Tyranid-choked sky. But the enemy did not stop. They rained down in fleshy pods, birthing a carpet of claws that surged toward the city perimeter. It was then that the Omnisci's Truth, hovering just above the lunar surface, opened its ventral heavy lifter bays. Gravity clamps disengaged with the sound of tearing metal. From the smoke and darkness of the hold dropped a cathedral of war. It stood 33 meters tall. Its feet were bastions of adamantium. Its shoulders bore the weight of apocalypse-class weaponry. It was a Warlord battle titan, the Deus Irae, god of wrath. When it impacted the moon's surface, the seismic shockwave knocked the advancing Tyranid swarms off their feet. This was not a vehicle. It was an avatar of the machine god. Princeps Majoris Harlan did not look through a windshield. He saw the battlefield through the manifold, a sensory projection fed directly into his cerebral cortex by the Titan's machine spirit. He felt the reactor in his chest thrumming with the fury of a contained star. He felt the void shields crackling over his skin. "Engine active," Harlan whispered, his voice amplified to boom across the comms network. "Targeting solution engaged. Glory to the Omnisia." He took a step. The servo actuators hissed like 1,000 steam trains. The Deus Irae strode forward, stepping over the outer piers of Atlantis. To the humans watching from the city's balconies, it was a terrifying juxtaposition. The elegant, silent, high-tech aesthetics of the ancients, overshadowed by the brutal, Gothic, walking industrial nightmare of the Imperium. Harlan leveled his right arm, a volcano cannon the size of a skyscraper. Purge, he thought. A beam of coherent laser energy, hot enough to core a planet, drew a line of fire across the horizon, vaporizing 10,000 gaunts in a single heartbeat. But the hive mind is not without its own gods. From the spore clouds descending from the orbit, a monstrosity landed. It was a Hierophant bio-titan, a towering arachnid horror of chitin and pulsing muscle, standing toe-to-toe with the Deus Irae. Its legs were scything blades that dug into the moon's bedrock. Its belly was a sack of virulent bioplasma. It roared, a sound that wasn't audio, but a psychic scream that made the Princeps nose bleed inside his amniotic tank. "Threat assessment extreme," the moderator called out from the lower deck of the Titan's head. The Hierophant lunged, its biocannon spitting streams of acid that splashed against the Titan's void shields. The shields flared violet and collapsed under the deluge. Armor plating hissed and melted, dripping molten ceramite onto the lunar soil. The beast was fast, faster than anything that size had any right to be. "I can't track it. It's too fast for the traverse gears." Harlan gritted his teeth, feeling the phantom pain of the Titan's melting armor as if it were his own skin. "Colonel Sheppard, I require suppression." In the skies above, the last of the puddle jumpers, piloted by a weary Major Lorne, dove into the fray. "I'm on it, big guy," Lorne grunted. He unleashed the last of the drone reserves. The golden squid swarmed around the Hierophant's head, stinging its eyes, blowing apart sensory tendrils. It was a mosquito attack on a dinosaur, but it was enough. The Biotitan flinched, distracted by the ancient tech buzzing around its face. It was the opening Harlan needed. "Strike true," the Princeps roared. The Warlord Titan stepped into the blow, swinging its power fist, a weapon capable of crushing a starship. The fist connected with the Hierophant's midsection. There was a sickening crunch of breaking chitin and wet tearing of flesh. The impact threw the Biotitan back, green ichor spraying like a geyser. Harlan did not hesitate. He locked his stabilizer gyros and fired the volcano cannon at point-blank range directly into the wound. The laser beam cooked the beast from the inside out. The Hierophant didn't die quietly. It exploded in a cloud of boiling blood and bone shards. The shockwave rattled the spires of Atlantis, cracking windows in the central tower. "Engine kill," Harlan reported, his voice heavy with exhaustion. But the victory was short-lived. "Princeps, reactor containment is critical," the moderator screamed. The acid damage from the fight had eaten through the cooling vents. The Deus Irae was dying. Its heart was going critical. Harlan looked at the sensors. The repairs on Atlantis are done. The city is charging its drive. "Go," Harold transmitted to Weir. "The machine spirit prepares for its final journey. We will hold the line here."
The end of the Deus Irae was not a death. It was a stellar event. On the cratered surface of the moon, the Warlord Titan, bleeding reactor coolant and surrounded by the broken carcasses of biomonsters, initiated its final protocol, the Cataclysm Override. Princeps Harlan did not scream as the containment fields failed. He simply recited the litany of unending iron. The explosion was blinding, a miniature sun blooming on the gray rock, a sphere of pure, unadulterated plasma that vaporized the approaching Tyranid horde instantly. The shockwaves slammed into the shielding of Atlantis, which was hovering precariously above the surface, its engines screaming in a pitch that shattered glass across the central spire. To the observers on the distant, retreating Imperial frigates, it looked as though the moon itself was cracking apart. The sacrifice of the God Machine had bought them exactly 12 seconds of operational window. "Now, engage the star drive, bypass the safety buffers." Dr. Weir's command was less an order and more a plea to the universe. Rodney McKay, his hands flying across the crystal interface, engaged the algorithm. The ancient star drive was designed to slip a city into the clean mathematical dimension of hyperspace, but in the 41st millennium, the hyperspace lanes were calm rivers no longer. They were the turbulent depths of the warp. As the drive activated, the city did not accelerate into streaks of starlight. Instead, reality shrieked. The space around Atlantis twisted like wet canvas. The gravity well of the exploding Titan, combined with the exotic energy of the ZPM and the psychic weight of the Tyranid Hive Mind, created a tear in the fabric of the material universe. Atlantis didn't launch, it fell upwards into a hole in reality that smelled of old nightmares. The transition was a sensory assault. For a singular, horrifying moment, every soul on board Atlantis, from the Terran expedition crew to the fervent tech priests of the Imperial ships, saw the true face of the galaxy. They saw the great ocean of souls. The city lurched violently, tearing a massive chunk of the moon's bedrock up with it as it vanished. But they did not go alone. Clinging to the outer edges of the shield and buried within the rock strata the city had lifted were thousands of Tyranid organisms. And worse, the tear in reality had attracted the attention of things that dwelt in the deep warp. The clean blue tunnel of the Stargate network was replaced by a kaleidoscope of madness, purples, reds, and colors that human eyes were not evolved to see. The Geller fields of the Imperial ships screamed as they tried to extend their protective bubbles to cover the entire city, overlapping with the ancient shields in a desperate, flickering patchwork of survival. In the physical universe, silence returned to the system. The moon was shattered, a broken ring of debris orbiting the gas giant. The High Fleet, denied its primary meal, began to turn its hunger elsewhere. A single encrypted data burst was picked up by a listening post on the edge of the Segmentum Solar. It was the final transmission of Magos Varlian, sent milliseconds before the jump. It was not a plea for rescue. It was a theological revelation. The message read, "Status perdita, location unknown, asset secured, revelation. The Omniscii has a new face, and it is made of crystal. We sail into hell, but we bring the light." The High Lords of Terra would later classify the event as Incident Atlantis, sealing the records under the highest seal of the Inquisition. The lost city was gone, erased from the star maps, becoming yet another legend in a galaxy composed of forgotten truths. But the story did not end. It merely changed genres. Somewhere deep within the Immaterium, drifting on the tides of the Empyrean, the city of Atlantis floats. It is a ghost ship of immense power, a beacon of light in a sea of daemons. The shield flickers, powered by a draining ZPM and the crude fusion prayers of the Adeptus Mechanicus. In the lower decks, the lights are out. The sound of skittering claws echoes in the ventilation shafts, where the Tyranids that were pulled along with them now breed. In the upper spires, Sheppard cleans his P90, while the Skitarii Ranger sharpens a radium blade next to him. They are lost. They are damned. But they are alive. The war for the galaxy is over for them. The war for the city has just begun.